are the Cleveland Browns, in your opinion?
Well, two things that need to be fixed, and they're really overused words in the NFL, but I think they're used for a reason, and because it's very, very important. Culture and character. I think they have all the talent that you can ask for. They have 2 all-star receivers. You have a great running back. Offensive line needs some work. I think your quarterback is going to need some adjusting, but they need a better culture and character. And when you look at this football team, I think back to the Kansas City Chiefs before Andy Reid got there. They were 2-14 the last year of Romeo Cornell. They were absolutely terrible. They had a bunch of good players on that football team, though. And when Andy came in with a better culture, he built a better character inside that locker room. They were 11-5 the next year, made it to the playoffs. They have an opportunity here in Cleveland to do something that they haven't done in 17 years, which is make the playoffs if they find the right guy. But that guy has to come in strong-handed and say, this is what's going to be allowed now, and all that stuff that you did before, none of it's going to be allowed. If they can do that, they can build that culture. They can build that character in that locker room to go along with the talent that they have, and they can win, be a winning football team. It can happen overnight. It won't happen overnight, but it can because you have that talent on that football team. You just have to bring the right guy in.
Yeah, you see a lot of teams go from worst to first throughout the National Football League from one year to another, and I think the Cleveland Browns have the talent to be able to compete for that division title, even with the Baltimore Ravens, who are a 14-2 team now, the #1 seed in the AFC. The Cleveland Browns are a very talented team. From that regard, John Dorsey did his job, but the one thing that he failed to do was identify who the head coach of this team needs to be, and that's why he ultimately lost his job. So moving forward with this organization, I think the approach that they're taking is the right one in making sure that they find the right coach. It's why they moved on from John Dorsey. They want their next head coach to have input on who he's going to work with in the front office as the general manager. So I think that's absolutely the right approach because you need to try to attract the most qualified candidate possible. You need somebody that can not only fix Baker Mayfield, get him to stop throwing the ball to the other team, but you also need somebody that can create the culture that can support sustained winning. That's been the thing that the Cleveland Browns have missed on since the expansion team got back to Cleveland in, what was it, 98? So I think that that's the most important thing for the Cleveland Browns, identifying who the head coach is going to be and making sure that that guy is not a question mark, that you know that that guy can actually do the job in the NFL.
Jimmy Haslam is the owner of the Browns. He bought the team in 2012 after being a minority owner with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Since then, they have had 5 general managers, about to have a 6th. They've had 5 head coaches, not even counting the interim ones, about to have a 6th. And 13 different people have started at quarterback. Since Jimmy Haslam's been the owner, they have had a combined 23 coaches, GMs, and quarterbacks. Obviously, that is the recipe for total organizational failure, right? So whatever happens in Cleveland, you have to deal with the fact that the ownership situation there, let's just be kind and call it far less than ideal. And quick triggers. No GM has lasted more than 2 years. John Dorsey was one of the, I think, one of the longest tenured GMs because he got 2 full seasons. Coaches there they've been one and done with coaches twice now. Rod Chudzinski was one and done, and then also Freddie Kitchens was one and done. Your point about the Chiefs example, very similarly, Romeo was an interim head coach who got promoted because they beat the at the time undefeated Packers and everyone liked him, and then they absolutely fell apart under his watch, right? So they clearly hired the wrong coach. But your point on character and character and accountability,
and
culture, yeah. That is where the Browns have a void right now, and where I would say is the biggest concern. Because what they need is the guy who was over my shoulder a moment ago, Baker Mayfield. They need someone in there as soon as possible to put their arms around Baker and say, hey, man, this right here, this moment, more so than when you walked on at Texas Tech, more so than when you left there, more so than your rookie year. This is your fork in the road moment of your career. Your rabbi within the organization, John Dorsey, is gone. The head coach who, it's no longer a guy who got the job in part because of his relationship with you. It is going to be based on your performance and your performance alone, whether or not we are looking for our 14th starting quarterback over the last 7 seasons, or if you have this job for the next 14 seasons yourself. That has to happen, and someone that has the power of not only personality, but the power of fear that your offensive coordinator and your star players are not openly flirting with other teams. Like, hey, we killed Odell for saying, come get me. The hell you expect him to do if he hears one of the grown-ups in the room, Todd Monken, talking mess about his own team while he's there? It was a total mess there. We blamed Baker because his play was poor. We blamed Odell for reasons I don't totally understand. But I would rather take over a talented, dysfunctional team than a team that has been stripped for its parts that you're going to have to rebuild from the studs up, especially when I know my owner has a quick trigger on it. How much do you think Baker is an attractive piece, a positive or a negative, for whomever the next head coach is going to be? When they're bringing people in for the interviews, do you think one of the reasons they want the job is because Baker's there, or do you think Baker's something they feel like they have to deal with temporarily while they rebuild up the rest of the team?
Yeah, I don't think if you're a coach looking at this situation, you're saying, I want to go there to coach Baker. He's not the guy that's going to draw you there, but Nick Chubb certainly will. Odell Beckham Jr. certainly will. Jarvis Landry certainly will draw me there. And then when I look at Baker, if I'm the coach, I'm saying, well, I can work around some of these things. And if he doesn't fall in line, I'm absolutely bringing in a veteran quarterback that's going to push him. That's going to say, hey, Baker, if you keep throwing the ball to the other team, then you won't be on the field. We're going to put this veteran, Case Keenum type of guy in there and allow him to play. And so to me, that's the first thing I'm doing. I'm bringing in a veteran and saying, it's either going to be you playing the way that I want you to play, or this other guy is going to play, because we can't continue to waste the type of talent that we have on this football team. The other thing about this, the culture and the GM and the character, GMs and head coaches have to be on the same page. I remember Tom Heckert, God rest his soul, and Andy Reid, they both were on the same page. They knew exactly the type of players that you wanted to bring in, because Tom knew that Andy needed smart guys, guys that were willing to sacrifice, and they understood the infrastructure of an organization. The coaches here, we're not questioning him, and everyone's going to play up to their potential. They've never had that in Cleveland. That's one of the reasons why they played so poorly.
Yeah, and two of the organizations that are in their division have. You look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, and you look at the Baltimore Ravens. Both of those organizations, with their head coach and their general manager, they're clearly in lockstep. And that's what Cleveland has to build toward. But I think it starts with exactly what you said, being able to hold folks accountable. And it started with holding John Dorsey accountable for his decision to hire Freddie Kitchens as the head coach. And we see a year later, that was clearly the wrong decision. But also with Baker Mayfield, his performance on the field. 21 interceptions, 22 touchdown passes, that ain't going to get it done. So you do need to have somebody there that's saying, you know what, if you're not producing up to expectations, why we drafted you with the first overall pick in the first place, then we're going to take you off the field and put somebody out there that we think can get that job done. Enough with the progressive commercials. We need to find somebody that can actually go out there and get this team headed down the right road in terms of progress and consistent winning. And so when you look at who are the prospective head coaches that the Cleveland Browns should be interested in my opinion, it should be somebody that has prior head coaching experience, because I don't want a question mark at the head coaching spot when I got question marks throughout my entire organization.
And the two most important people for a football team are their coach and their quarterback. And the Baltimore Ravens have a great coach and league MVP at quarterback. The Pittsburgh Steelers have a question mark, I believe, at quarterback moving forward because of Big Ben's age, but they have a coach who has never had a losing season, including this year where he had to go with Mason Rudolph and the Duck for the entirety of the season. And the Cincinnati Bengals, I don't know if Zach Taylor's a good coach or not, but they're about to have Joe Burrow if they want him. They're about to have the #1 overall pick at quarterback. The Browns might have the biggest question mark in the division at quarterback, and they certainly have the biggest question mark in the division at coach because it's not filled. So that's what they have to work towards. If they get either of those right, certainly if they get both of them right, then the rest of the talent shines through and they can be the 11-5 team that this dope right here predicted them to be at the beginning of the year. Coming up, is there any way the Pats can stop the fighting Ryan Tannehill Saturday? That's next. This is back here on First Things First. On Tuesday, the Browns and general manager